I want to welcome everyone here today to Data in the ATL. Again, we're doing something a little different. We are very happy to have a GSU alumnus with us today, Shawn Williams, and he'll tell you more about himself in a minute. But I wanted to, again, thank you for joining us, and stay tuned to Data in the ATL. We hope to bring more guests to you this semester and next. So today's guest is Shawn Williams, Analytics Energy Procurement Supervisor at UPS here in Atlanta. And we're so happy to have him back, if only virtually. Shawn earned his BS in economics from Georgia State's Andrew Young School of Policy Studies with a Spanish minor, and we may get into that later. I hope we will. And that was back in 2018 when he graduated from Georgia State. And since graduation, Shawn has worked as a data analyst for two Atlanta-based Fortune 500 companies, UPS and Delta Airlines. He also took advantage of co-op and internship opportunities while at GSU that led to his early career success. So Shawn, welcome to you. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you.
So
thank you so much, Brian.
Before we get into UPS and data analytics and procurement and all the interesting things that we're going to get into today, could you tell us about yourself and your background and what led you to your current position? I'm sure the students on the event today would really like to hear more about you. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm 26 years old. I live in downtown Atlanta, so not far from the Georgia State campus. So a little story about me. I was born in New York, actually Westchester County. Anybody who knows about Westchester, I am the last of triplet boys. And so that's a quick little nugget to remember me by. I've had an interesting upbringing. So I lived in New York, Michigan, and I moved to Atlanta the Atlanta area when I was 14. So I've been here ever since. I started college at Morehouse College in 2012. I spent about 2.5 years there, now 3 years, and I transferred to Georgia State in the fall of 2015. And so from there, another 3 years, and I got my degree, Bachelor of Science in Economics with a Spanish minor. In my free time, I sing. I have a band that I work with. Although I work a very technical world, I am not a technical person outside of work. I'm very much a human being that enjoys the arts and other worldly pleasures. So, yeah, that's really me in a nutshell.
Well,
I'm sure we'll get into more about me in the interview.
Well, we are very glad to see a Georgia State Panther making it in the world, and you're doing some interesting work we're going to get to. But we're very proud of your early success in your careers. But could you tell us more about when you transferred to Georgia State? You transferred and you chose econ as a major. Could you tell more about the program here and some of the experiences you had that led to your career?
So when I left Morehouse in the spring of 2015, I believe I left as a mathematics major. And so it was right after my first co-op, actually, that I decided to switch schools. And after having that experience, working for Delta Airlines in their co-op program, some of the students should be familiar with that program, particularly if they are STEM majors. And after gaining some experience within organizations or the business world in corporate America, I thought to myself, now I know what I'm interested in doing. I didn't necessarily know that this would be my career trajectory, but this is something that I could focus on in the meantime. And so I decided to pursue a degree in economics because I felt as an economically minded person, that's how really firms, it's really about learning the theory of the firm and how firms operate. And I believe at that time that studying economics would help me be a far better asset to any company that I work for. So
Yeah, well, we're big fans of the Andrew Young School. I failed to mention earlier when in the introductions that this series is brought to you by the University Library here at Georgia State University, and we are very Andrew Young School are good partners, and we very much appreciate their students and their new focus on data analytics in their programs. There's our own research data services that we provide through the library, and the Andrew Young School's data analytics focus is a good marriage there. We're very pleased to be a partner with them. So, so Shawn, your current position, and we were talking about this earlier, but if you could share with those who are viewing today, you're currently at UPS. And I mentioned you're dealing with analytics, energy procurement. And could you talk more about your position there at UPS? And we'll transition back to Georgia State later, but could you talk more about your daily work there?
So essentially what I'm managing is their analytics strategy within the energy procurement division. So when you think of procurement, procuring a specific commodity, and where with our organization, we're procuring energy, specifically fuel for about over 100,000 trucks, vehicles, UPS trucks, the brown trucks that deliver your packages, and that there's an entire organization that's dedicated to that process. Where does analytics come into play? How can we optimize that process? How can we make sure that every truck that we have, even fleet that we're introducing, trucks that we're introducing to our fleet, have the right amount of fuel at the right time, at the right price? And essentially what I'm tasked with doing is maintaining the business intelligence stack. One of the main tools that we use at UPS is Power BI, which is a data visualization tool that can be used for reporting, showcasing dashboards to management and to other colleagues. And so that's mainly what my role is centered on, is just managing the information that our leaders would need to make better decisions.
And you said Power BI. BI stands for Business Intelligence?
Business Intelligence.
Is that right? Okay. Just for those on the call like me who are very unaware, and not in the know about this stuff. So very interesting. So you mentioned fuel. Fuel is probably, I'm sure, is a big concern for a company like UPS. Could you talk more about that?
Yes, so I believe it's behind people is the largest expense at UPS. And so controlling for that, yet again, as an economist, I'm always thinking about that, because any good company that wants to survive needs to be able to control its costs. And so we're purchasing fuel every day. And the price of fuel is one of the main determinants that basically determine or influence what we buy, when we buy it, who we buy it from. And so with that, we have jet fuel for UPS Airlines. And we also procure automotive fuel like diesel and unleaded for our trucks. So it seems simple enough, but there's an entire organization that's dedicated to that. And it can get pretty complicated, particularly during hurricane seasons. So
right. So so you mentioned hurricane season. So talk more about that, the disruptions that are happening, and have you seen any disruption in the whole COVID pandemic? Has that influenced any of the data you're looking at?
Well, interestingly enough, outside of the fuel or outside of the energy procurement world, UPS has, fortunately, not necessarily by our own choices, but fortunately we've succeeded somewhat or had an advantage during this pandemic. We're seeing that online sales of merchandise are going up. And so that's going to create a demand for shipments across the US. And so we've been really busy, of course, before the onset of the pandemic, but since the pandemic has really hit, there's definitely opportunity out there for us that we have taken advantage of, and it's worked out well for us. What I was going to speak about are certain we've had a few tropical storms throughout the summer season, and that definitely has sort of a domino effect, particularly on our businesses, because we depend on the pipeline system, and on a particular vendors like Exxon and other vendors that actually sell fuel to us. And so if a hurricane or a tropical storm is affecting their operations, that's less fuel for us to procure for our trucks. And so it can get really complicated really quick. And so we have an entire team that's dedicated to anticipating that and ensuring the continuity of the business in the event that these events happen. So,
okay, so Shawn, without getting into the weeds too much here or into the specifics too much, could you talk a little bit more about the data points that you analyze and look at on a daily basis to give our viewers a better sense of your daily work?
Different data points that I look at essentially involve fuel consumption. What are we using on a daily basis? We also, I get a lot of reports. So a lot of what I'm doing is market research on what our fuel index, or what our price indexes are looking like. And then we also have another side where we're looking at utility data. And so we have probably hundreds of sites, UPS sites throughout the US. And with that, we have to manage our utilities, which meaning water, sewer, electricity, natural gas, etc. So I'm also looking at analyzing trends, particularly in the mornings when I come in, on the varying prices and the factors that put pressure on prices for us.
Well, thank you. That helps put it in context a bit for me as well. So thank you. So I'm going to switch gears for a minute, and we may get back to your work, but you and I were talking earlier before we began this talk on you have a Spanish minor from Georgia State, and you have worked now for two global companies, Fortune 500 global companies. Could you speak more to your background and training at Georgia State, your Spanish minor, and how you think that has contributed to your early career success?
It was interesting because I didn't think that it would translate so quickly. While I was pursuing my degree, I was actually working full time for Delta Airlines. So I was blessed enough to have that opportunity. And what was interesting about the role then is I was working in an analytical role, but it was more so business focused, where we had clients from El Salvador, Mexico, and even in Asia, China. And so I would have to, like, one example of where my skills or my Spanish education came into play was we would have business performance reviews. And either we would invite our vendors to come and we'd basically collaborate on or review our performance for the past quarter or 6 months or so. And I was able to communicate with our vendors, given that I had that Spanish background. I think they were really impressed. And it showed how well-rounded and how global that, to be successful, not necessarily to be successful, but to have that extra edge that definitely gives you a competitive advantage.
Well, that's interesting because that leads to my next question, because a theme throughout this series has been people that go into data analytics work or data science don't always come from science backgrounds, computer science, mathematics. Although you said you had started off as a math major in your early college career. So could you talk about this a little bit
Yes.
more? You have a bachelor's in economics, and we just talked about the Spanish. What are some of those soft skills? We again, in this series, we talk about those hard coding skills and knowing how to use the software and some statistics, knowledge of statistics and data analysis. But could you talk more about those soft skills that you think are so essential for students to have?
I think number one would be to have strong interpersonal skills. If you, particularly in the roles that I have had over the past few years, is certainly not something to sit behind a desk and code for 8 hours. Now, if you want to do that, that's fine. There are careers out there for that. But what's interesting about where my path has taken me is I've been able to bridge the gap between the technical world, the IT world, and business. So many of the guys and gals that you'll encounter, i.e. your stakeholders, they don't really know the data. They don't know how to speak to the data. It's your job to know the data, to be technical enough, to have that aptitude to manipulate and to use tools to deliver a story. Basically, it's really a way of storytelling. That's another soft skill, having the ability to tell stories with data, but also to communicate it in a way that makes sense, and that is effective and actionable, something that your stakeholder or your customer can use. Thirdly, I would say always having an aptitude to ask questions. And I think that was when I first started out, particularly in my first co-op, I was really afraid to ask questions because I didn't want to be seen as incompetent. But that's how you get to competency. That's how you get to learn your business. You get to make your stakeholders happy by asking the essential questions so they can get what they need. But in terms of some of the soft skills that I've acquired really started early on. I mean, when I was in high school, I started learning Python. And I didn't really think that would translate into anything later. But I did a variety of things. And throughout my college career, I understood the importance of co-opting and interning because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And so having that experience, rotating yourself in other business units, that's going to also help you succeed. That's going to give you that competitive edge, so to speak. And I know I went on a tangent about it, but
that's good.
The path to basically what I do now is not linear. Certainly, it's every experience that I've had for any company, any person that I've interacted with or worked for, it's certainly been useful.
Well, that you hit every point that I hoped you would in that answer as a faculty member and employee of Georgia State. It sounds like we did right by you, and hopefully you took advantage of all these great things, the co-op and internship opportunities. I think I really applaud you for really applying yourself to those instead of being on the sidelines. Your first job at Delta really was a direct result of was it a co-op or an internship with Delta when you were an undergrad here?
So it was a co-op.
Co-op.
So this was a co-op meeting full time. Yeah.
Full time. Okay. So that turned into your first position there at Delta. So
yes, basically, yeah.
So since we've mentioned Delta and we've talked about fuel and jet fuel, maybe we should spend just a minute here. Could you talk a little bit about your work there at Delta, and then we'll wrap up. We'll come back with any final thoughts you have for our GSU students. But could you just share a little bit about what you are doing at Delta Airlines? We'd like to hear about that as well.
So the interesting thing about Delta, prior to working. I didn't know, just like anybody else that is outside of an organization and doesn't know the ins and outs and workings. I looked at Delta as, okay, there are planes, there are flight attendants, there are pilots. I just looked at the customer facing side, but there's so much that is going on in the background. I worked specifically at that time, actually throughout my whole career at Delta, in their maintenance organization. So this organization essentially supports any and every maintenance activity not our, because I'm no longer working for Delta, but at that time, about 800 airplanes or aircraft in their fleet. And so that ranges anything from doing aircraft, routine maintenance checks, certain modifications, certain modifications that meaning like upgrades, like or seat upgrades, or the IFE that you now see on some of the fleet now. That's all handled by that organization. Where I came in was essentially Delta, like many other companies, they recognize the need for data, but they don't necessarily know how to leverage it. And so when I first started, I was in more of a reporting role. So I was reporting certain metrics that were mainly performance driven. How are we doing in this area? Which area needs attention, et cetera. Then I moved on to, when I came back to Delta in 2018, I was working specifically for an organization that was managing another maintenance organization that we were paying these guys or other vendors to repair our aircraft. And so that was interesting because I was introduced to a new data or business intelligence program, so to speak. Some of you may be familiar with SAS, which is a really powerful software that combines the languages of SQL and its own internal programmatic functionality to basically do the same things that any organization would want: reporting, data analysis, using those reports to create visualizations and so on. And so during my time there, I mean, there was a lot that I worked on, many business units that I touched, from engineering to materials, which is another large, when you think about airplanes or aircraft, and the maintenance of aircraft, we consume a lot of materials, and it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of energy that goes into, or legwork that goes into ensuring that that organization has what they need. So I was really proud to work in those spaces, because I don't think people realize really how much work goes on in the background to deliver a product to a customer who's purchasing a seat on a plane. So,
yeah, that's very interesting. What is Delta? One of our largest Georgia employers. What is do you know off the top of your head? I mean, it is a massive organization. I've met a couple of folks who work there in different aspects of the organization. I'm just amazed.
I think within tech ops, that's the umbrella that I worked under, Delta Technical Operations. I think we have about 10,000 employees worldwide. In Atlanta, I mean, the bulk of our tech ops employees are in Atlanta. So I would assume a majority of those 10,000 employees work at our hub in Atlanta, which is, I mean, it's huge. I mean, I think we have 3 or 4 test cells for our engines, and we have maintenance bays for our aircraft. And not only do we maintain our own aircraft, the first internship, or the first co-op that I did for Delta, I was working for a business unit that essentially dealt with maintenance, repair, and overhaul sales. So not only does Delta fly passengers, we also make money repairing other aircraft for other airlines around the world. Wow. So that was pretty neat to get that experience and and to understand how data is plays an integral part in the operations.
Well, Shawn, it's been great talking to you today. We're going to have to wrap things up a bit, but before we do, I just wanted to get back to your training and experiences here at Georgia State, and wanted to ask you, is there any advice you might give our students here who may not have considered a data career? I think the title of your talk today is Expand Your Horizons. Is there any advice you might give of training or skills that students might develop so that they too could follow in your footsteps?
I think being that I had more of a non-traditional path to where I am now, I mean, it's 2020, but 10 years ago, there weren't a lot of analytics or data driven programs, and they certainly weren't marketed as much then as it is now, because there is such a demand. I think I was reading a report where in the following year, there's going to be a demand of like 100,000 plus entries for those data analyst positions. But any advice that I would have for a student who's undecided, you don't necessarily need to get a degree, in my opinion, in data analysis or analytics. That would help. But there are many people who are working in my field that came from diverse backgrounds: history, English, economics like myself, business, maybe a language degree, maybe a biology degree. The main thing that I think what would help an undecided student is there are a lot of resources, free resources out there. You have YouTube, you have lynda.com, Khan Academy, that can teach you the basic skills. So if you want to learn this basic data analysis, understand SQL. If you understand SQL, and if you really understand Microsoft Excel, not just putting data into a cell and maybe formatting it and looking pretty, understanding the power of those two tools, that's going to set you on a pretty good path. So for that undecided student, you don't need a degree in a data centered academic field. Yet again, it would help. However, you could learn what I'm doing now with many of the resources that are out there online and even in your work experience. So there are many basically pathways to what I do, and in this field.
Well, that's very encouraging words. I don't know anyone who could have said it any better. It's exactly what we're focusing on here. It's the whole package, the college to career. It's the courses you take, and it's all the credentials you get on the side. And you mentioned lynda.com and all these wonderful things that our students have available to them while they're at Georgia State. Lynda.com and our LinkedIn for learning, and that whole ecosystem, LinkedIn. Get in that and get some of that training under your belt. In fact, I had met you at a previous Data in the ATL talk here at Georgia State University Library, and linked in with you, and that's how we rekindled this this relationship. I had met you, and you reminded me that I had met you at a Data in the ATL. So it was really great to catch up with you as well. Mm-hmm. So Shawn, thank you so much for your time. And we really appreciate it. It's so glad to know where you are, and we would love to have you back at some point to find out, where Shawn is next. We really enjoyed talking today. And so I'm going to wrap this up, but remind our viewers today that we will return with more Data in the ATL. Hopefully, we look forward to getting folks back on campus and in the library and in our space called Curve. And I'm so sorry, Shawn, that we couldn't bring you into Curve today for this, but we will. I'll make it up to you at some point, I promise. So, any last words, Shawn, before we go?
I just say there's so much demand out there, and it would be foolish not to hop on the bandwagon.
Yeah, I
So,
hear you. I hear you.
not when employers are throwing money. Yes.
All right. So again, a positive ending to this conversation, and we thank you all. And stay tuned. You can find us by Googling data in the ATL, and we look forward to seeing you at our next talk.